settled in here, I got a little backstory I want to share with you all first. Again, I said this is about storytelling, and I got a couple stories here. So, for one, the Atlanta Film Society is one of the oldest organizations in the country dedicated to the moving image, be it film, television, VR, or otherwise. And our flagship program, the Academy Award Qualifying Atlanta Film Festival, that you are at right now, is one of the longest running and most competitive film festivals in the world. We have a special set of awards that we present only on the most worthy of occasions. As an organization about storytelling and storytellers, it is our responsibility to help tell Atlanta's story. And those stories have been, frankly, a little taken for granted, overlooked, and forgotten under the kudzu. But it's time we help them rise up and realize that if either you were lucky enough to be born here or became an Atlantan on purpose, this is the heritage we all share. See, most of all, that's not a coincidence that these things happen here. It's part of why we love to call this place home. The characters of Atlanta and Georgia's story are what make it such a good one. The exposition is Atlanta, the city burned down in the throes of the Civil War, rose up from the ashes to redefine itself and set a new course. For so many transplants to Atlanta, this city is a place for a fresh start, for a new life, for an exciting new opportunity to spread one's wings. And when you think about it, Atlanta is the place where a young, unknown pharmacist made a tonic that not only made you feel good, but taste good too, and it would go on to be the #1 selling drink in the world. That's kind of crazy. That shouldn't have worked. It's where a young entertainer who had seen every challenge in life that one can imagine goes from living out of his car to being the biggest media mogul in the country, and not only opening the first production studio owned by an African American, but the biggest studio by anyone in America. A young college student on the front lines of the battle for civil rights, knowing that across the Pettus Bridge would be certain death and would still march on. And until his last breath served this nation as our very own congressman. Where an unorthodox businessman from Macon, who sold his family's billboard business, invested it all in a new technology called cable television and saw the value in rewatching old movies and starts a 24-hour news network. A young ball player who started in the Negro League looked at the immovable record of the legendary Babe Ruth and said, "Watch this." A peanut farmer who would have the gall to run for president, who would win and still spends the rest of his life to this day serving others in this country and around the world. And last, but certainly not least, a young minister born just 3 doors down from the church where his own father preached in would go on to lead a movement to get us steps closer to the American promise. Anyone who's lived here for more than a few months knows the names of everyone whom I just mentioned. See, these things, or at least their odds, are crazy, and they shouldn't have worked, and might not have anywhere else. But in Atlanta, the Phoenix City, it's a town of innovators, originators, and rebels. And so we choose to celebrate those whose tenacity we recognize as making them an originator, innovator, rebel, or phoenix in their own right, and for us in the world of the moving image. We've presented these awards to people like actor Daveed Diggs, director Jason Reitman, writer-director Spike Lee, and President Carter himself. So tonight we honor 2 people with these awards. Few Hollywood figures have possessed the immense presence on both the big screen and silver screen that Vincent D'Onofrio has exhibited now for his 40-year career. After cutting his teeth in community theater productions, Vincent studied method acting and earned several roles in off-Broadway productions. In the mid-1980s, he burst onto the scene with his Broadway debut in Open Admissions, and his film debut in the Troma production, The First Turn On. Any of you don't know what Troma is? Look it up. His undeniable breakthrough, however, came in the form of Private Leonard Lawrence in Stanley Kubrick's 1987 Academy Award-nominated film, Full Metal Jacket. Vincent had heard from his friend and future co-star Matthew Modine about casting of the film and rented video equipment so he could send a tape to Kubrick. And Kubrick himself had said that the role of Private Lawrence was the film's most difficult to cast, but quickly saw the promise of Mr. D'Onofrio and adapted the role for him. Vincent did some adapting himself, gaining 70 pounds for the character. From then on, Vincent D'Onofrio found himself a hot commodity in Hollywood, starring in films like Mystic Pizza, JFK, The Player, Ed Wood, The Whole Wide World, and let's not forget his unforgettable turn as Edgar in Men in Black, an iconic in pop culture, and lives rent-free in many of our heads. By the mid-1990s, Vincent had stacked up nominations for a Primetime Emmy, an Independent Spirit Award, and a slew of Critics Awards, and it did not stop there. Vincent D'Onofrio has acted in has well over 100 acting credits with films like The Cell, The Eyes of Tammy Faye, and Jurassic World, keeping him a household name for decades. Of course, we must also mention that his nearly 10-year stint as Detective Robert Gorin on Law & Order, Criminal Intent, and absolutely his indomitable presence as Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin, throughout the Marvel Universe. We want to honor Vincent D'Onofrio tonight. However, it isn't just his remarkable career as an actor. The Phoenix Award is presented to someone who proves that they can spread their wings and rise to new challenges. Vincent has proven himself a powerful multi-hyphenate. He started producing in the 1990s, started writing and directing in the 2000s, and has even dedicated his time and effort on our very own specific side of the industry, the film festival world, co-founding the River Run International Film Festival in North Carolina 25 years ago. That's right. And still serves on the advisory board for the Woodstock Film Festival in New York. Tonight's Atlanta Film Festival presentation of Night of the Cooters allows for a perfect storm of enviable talents of Mr. Vincent D'Onofrio. Whether behind the camera, in front of the camera, or behind the scenes, Vincent D'Onofrio has proven he can rise to new heights, and for that, we are pleased to present him with the Phoenix Award.
Was doing interviews out there. I didn't even know I was getting this tonight. So it's fantastic. Thank you. Can we move on now to
But wait, there's more. Just over 11 years ago in this very theater, the Atlanta Film Festival played the season 2 premiere of a tiny, hardly seen HBO series called Game of Thrones. We really seemed to put it on the map, though, because boy, did it blow up and become a cultural phenomenon. I'm joking, of course. Joking about us putting on the map, though, I mean, who's to say? But I'm not joking about becoming a cultural phenomenon. In fact, one can hardly separate the entire decade of the 2010s from Game of Thrones. Few entities have held a complete stranglehold on pop culture like Game of Thrones, possessed at its zenith, which continues today with House of Dragon. And of course, there are many contributing factors to the franchise success, but one factor rules them all, and that is George R.R. Martin. Since becoming a published author in 1971, George R.R. Martin has accumulated a host of awards, including 6 Hugo Awards, 4 Primetime Emmy Awards, and being named the most influential person in the world by Time magazine. He's not just a novelist, however. His work across film and television dates back to the 1980s, where he worked on The Twilight Zone and Beauty and the Beast. With the publishing and subsequent adaptation of A Song of Fire and Ice series, George R.R. Martin triggered a paradigm shift, splitting the fantasy genre into 2 halves, a pre-Martin and a post-Martin. His works have now influenced those who have come up after him the way that Beowulf and the works of J.R.R. Tolkien influenced him. But it doesn't stop with his credits. George R.R. Martin is known and lauded for his accessibility and commitment to his fans. This year, we are honored to recognize George R.R. Martin for creating some of the most expansive, most beloved, most decorated works in both literary and television history. Martin has demonstrated a commitment to cinema and storytelling as his preservation and the reopening of the historic Jean Cocteau Cinema in Santa Fe, New Mexico. A special place in my heart, and kudos to him for that. And his work in producing this innovative project using Trioscope, Night of the Cooters, which the Atlanta Film Festival has the privilege of showcasing tonight. The Originator Award honors a true one-of-a-kind talent, someone who creates new ways of seeing and experiencing art. Originators are often imitated, never duplicated, and responsible for setting new industry standards. And George R.R. Martin is undoubtedly an originator. So please join me in welcoming him.
I have a wealth of microphones. I guess I'll use this one. Thank you. This is very kind of you, and I really appreciate it. Originator is quite a term. It's very flattering. But I will say that when I grew up in New Jersey, reading comic books, reading science fiction, reading fantasy, and I'm glad I've been able to make a contribution to these genres that I love, but I also think I've been fortunate in standing on the shoulders of giants, of people who came before me, like J.R.R. Tolkien, H.P. Lovecraft, Stan Lee, and Robert E. Howard, who was brought wonderfully to life by Vincent here in The Whole Wide World. So many others. I could list of 100 names. And for Night of the Cooters, which I hope you enjoy, it originated in the strange and terrible and frightening mind of Howard Waldrop, currently of Austin, Texas, born in Mississippi, grew up in Texas, lived in Seattle for a while, one of the premier short story writers of all time, really, certainly in science fiction and fantasy. Recently given a Lifetime Achievement Award by a World Fantasy Convention. Some of his reviews have called him a national treasure, which he is. And Night of the Cooters, I hope, is just the first of a series of unique, wonderful, and utterly different Howard Waldrop stories that we hope to be adapting into short films. Every one of them is different from the rest. Howard never writes the same things twice. So if you like this, and I hope you did, go up on Amazon and check out a Howard Waldrop book or two. They're all short story collections. He doesn't really do novels, but he does short stories like nobody else. So thank you, Atlanta. It's been a long time since I've been here, but it's nice to return here. I once, believe it or not, directed chess tournaments here in the early 70s. So I do have some weird history in Atlanta. Thank you.
Now we want to invite the rest of the cast and crew